Imagine a world carved not by Rome, not by Europe, but by one unstoppable titan, Alexander the Great. Now picture this. He doesn't die mysteriously at 32. No fever, no poison, no sudden collapse. Instead, he lives. And the world you're sitting in right now becomes almost unrecognizable. Let's step into a timeline where Alexander keeps conquering, and history never had a chance to breathe. Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BC, at the absolute height of his power. But he wasn't finished. His plans were already laid out: a conquest of Arabia, an invasion of Carthage, a massive naval expedition into the western Mediterranean, and the most insane dream of all, a push into Europe and beyond. Just one more decade of life, and the ancient world's political map shatters into 1,000,000 pieces. So what happens if he recovers from that final illness? First, Arabia falls. It falls easily. Alexander's army was battle-hardened, fiercely loyal, and technologically superior. The Arabian tribes would resist, yes, but they wouldn't stand a chance against the Macedonian war machine. The entire Red Sea would become a Macedonian lake. Next, Carthage becomes the great rival that history never saw. Before Rome ever rises, Alexander meets the world's most powerful trading empire head-on. It's the ultimate showdown. The Macedonian phalanx versus Carthaginian war elephants. Greek siege engines versus Phoenician naval power. Alexander likely wins. Carthage was incredibly wealthy, but politically fragmented. With Carthage gone, the Mediterranean becomes the Aegean Sea 2.0, completely under his control. And the Rome, you know? The Rome that conquered Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East? It simply doesn't happen. Before Rome can ever rise from a regional Italian republic, Alexander either crushes it or absorbs it through diplomacy. There would be no Julius Caesar, no Roman Empire, no Pax Romana. Instead, the world would be governed by a Pax Alexandrina, the Peace of Alexander. This creates a completely different civilization. We're talking about a unified mega-empire stretching from Greece to Egypt, to India, to the Mediterranean coast, and eventually deep into Europe. The results are world-altering. First, the great East-West divide never forms. Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian cultures blend into a single global civilization. There's no separate Western versus Eastern world. Just one cultural super-hybrid. Imagine Greek philosophy combined with Persian administration, Indian mathematics, and Egyptian science. The progress of humanity would accelerate at a mind-boggling pace. Which brings us to science. It would advance centuries early. Alexander was a massive supporter of architects, engineers, and mathematicians. If his empire stabilized, we could see early forms of steam power, advanced astronomy, and breakthrough medicine. The fusion of Eastern and Western knowledge would happen over 1,000 years earlier. The legendary Library of Alexandria wouldn't just be a library, it would become the world's first global university. Knowledge wouldn't burn, it would spread like wildfire. Religion would also evolve in completely unexpected ways. Christianity as we know it might never rise to prominence. Instead, a polytheistic, hybrid religion blending Greek gods, Egyptian deities, Zoroastrian principles, and Indian theology could become the dominant faith. The spiritual map of the world would be unrecognizable. So, Alexander eventually dies, maybe at 60, maybe older. What does he leave behind? A unified cultural empire, a global trade network, an early scientific infrastructure, and a world without Rome, without feudalism, without the fragmentation of the Middle Ages. Instead of collapsing into chaos, the empire would likely transition like the great dynasties of China or Persia. Dynasties would rise and fall, but the core civilization would survive. By the time the medieval world arrives in our timeline, Alexander's empire is already industrializing. Think trains, steamships, gunpowder, advanced navigation, and global trade, all happening centuries early. Alexander wouldn't just change ancient history. He would change the entire trajectory of human progress. So what does our world look like? No West, no East. Just a blended Alexandrian global civilization. A common language rooted in Greek, cities modeled after Alexandria. Philosophy shaped by Aristotle's lineage. Science pushed forward without interruption. borders erased by a unified empire stretching across 3 continents. If Alexander had lived, we wouldn't just live in a different world. We would be a completely different humanity. So let me ask you, would Alexander's world be a cultural paradise or an unstoppable imperial machine that crushed all resistance? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Would you choose our world or his? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more alternate histories.